Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Yin Kavat. On the show today, Takaichi Sanae maintains her stance on a Taiwan contingency after a Chinese diplomat's beheading threat. Meanwhile, Beijing goes into overdrive to distort and control the narrative. Then, after Seoul announces a nuclear-powered submarine, could Tokyo be next? And what would it mean for Allied naval power? Next, in terms of that balance of power, what does China's third aircraft carrier mean in the Western Pacific? Finally, weapon systems need permanent magnets made from heavy rare earths. Myanmar holds some of the world's biggest reserves, but can the US make inroads after decades of Chinese investment? To discuss this and more, I'm joined by Derek Mitchell, Center for Strategic and International Studies Asia Program Non-Resident Senior Advisor and former US Ambassador to Myanmar, and Randall Shriver, former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show today.
Thank you.
Last week, the Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae was asked in Parliament to explain what Taiwan scenario would constitute a, quote, survival-threatening situation for the country. Under Japan's constitution, such a scenario is defined as, quote, a situation in which an armed attack against a foreign country that has a close relationship with Japan occurs, and as a result threatens Japan's survival and poses a clear danger of fundamentally overturning people's right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But in 2015, security legislation introduced by Abe Shinzo, collective self-defense measures would be permitted under the Constitution under three conditions. First, there is a survival-threatening scenario. Second, there is no other means available to repel the attack. And three, if the defense measures taken are the minimum required. Responding to the debate, China's Consul General in Osaka, Xue Jian, then threatens the life of Takaichi, the leader of the country in which he is serving. Xue writes, "We have no choice but to cut off that dirty neck that has lunged at us without a moment's hesitation. Are you ready?" Tokyo described the language and conduct of the diplomat as extremely inappropriate and regrettable. But China's foreign ministry spokesperson defended these comments, saying if Japan, quote, dares to use military force to intervene in the Taiwan Strait, that will constitute an act of aggression, and China will strike back. He said Taiwan is so-called an internal matter. So, Derek, let me come to you first. You were US Ambassador to Myanmar. What do you make of the Chinese diplomat's post?
Well, with some experience in Asia and China's position and perspective on Taiwan, it's not surprising that they overreact to things like this entirely, but it's still not acceptable.
But we're used to sort of this wolf warrior language,
yes,
you know, sort of being thrown into the pit of hell and the fires of hell, this kind of thing. But this was very personal, wasn't it, this language? Yeah,
it was. I mean, it's not acceptable international behavior. I don't think it works well for China. I mean, most of these guys do this because they're speaking to an audience of one. They have to, if they're in Osaka or in Japan, this is a failure of their work in their view, and they have to defend the honor of the country, and they're speaking to Xi Jinping, in essence. I think there's also a bit of playing to the nationalist card here by the Chinese leadership, because they have some problems internally, and there's nothing better than playing the Japan card when they can, and anything Taiwan related, of course, they feel they need to react to. But I don't think it serves them well in Japan. I don't think it deters the Japanese people. And it certainly makes the region nervous about China.
How would it be dealt with in the US, though, if a diplomat did this to, you know, the president, said this to the president?
Oh, well, I think we'd make some very severe diplomatic representations. I don't know if we'd make him persona non grata and kick him out, but that person would not be able to do his job very well in the United States from that point on. That is crossing a line, and he or she would get enormous attention, negative attention, and probably be unable to do his or her job.
Now, Randy, we're now showing on screen, we're scrolling down a transcript of the actual exchange between Takaichi and opposition lawmaker Okada Katsuya, lasting about 30 minutes. We can't read or play the entire discussion because of its length and the depth and detail of the responses by the Japanese Prime Minister. But what I want to know is, Takaichi, she didn't say Japan would invade China. She was talking about collective defense, self-defense, defending her country in a survival-threatening situation. So how does this legitimize the anger and the overreaction by China?
Well, I don't think it does. And I agree very much with Ambassador Mitchell's comments. And I think particularly for Japan, where her mentor, Shinzo Abe, was assassinated, threats of violence have no place in this discussion or this dialogue whatsoever. I think from the Chinese perspective, this is very early in her tenure, and they're trying to send a signal and hopefully have her take more caution in the future. But I think she is very steadfast. She was mentored by Shinzo Abe. She has these firm views, and she's surrounded by very good advisors, people like Koizumi at the Defense Ministry and Motegi at the Foreign Ministry. So I think this is a very clear articulation of Japan's interests, and China's going to have to understand that.
We want to get onto the theme, which is co-option of the international media. So we're showing now some headlines of international media, including the BBC's, how the Japan PM's Taiwan remarks provoked the fury of China, or the Washington Post's Chinese outlet lashes out at Japanese Prime Minister, escalating the row. Derek, is there a theme here, which is, Takaichi is to blame for provoking China, which justifies China's anger?
I think there is a concern there. Look, part of China's strategy has been a narrative war, international narrative war, to have its version of events perpetuated and kind of in the mindset of people around the world. It's explicitly something Xi Jinping talks about, of winning the cognitive warfare. So when, as you say, when newspapers don't state that she was defending or explaining Japan's own national interests when it comes to Taiwan, she was not tying the hands of the Japanese and saying we are going to go to war over it or anything specific. She simply was saying that this is a severe concern to the security of my country. And she should be able to say that. So I think you're absolutely right. China likes to make everything about Taiwan about itself. Anything that is stated is a provocation against it and does not respect other people expressing their own security interests. And I think the media need to catch up to this. But I think Taiwan gets it. But I don't believe international society, international media do.
Yeah, I mean, Randy, is it actually a reflection of China's skill? They've had decades of essentially, exploiting, harnessing the international media, which, I expect that they claim to be neutral. So every time, the PRC puts out the press release, they'll simply just cover it.
Yeah, skill, but I would also say persistence, perseverance, and real dedicated efforts. As Derek mentioned, they care about the information space a great deal, and they pound away at things which to some Americans will sound insignificant. What the difference between do not support versus oppose independence. For most Americans, there's very little, if any, difference there. But for the Chinese, it's of utmost importance, and they persistently pound away at this so that they will carry the day when it comes to the predominant narrative. And it requires a pushback, it requires education, and it requires people who have the deeper knowledge of these issues to get out and articulate what the true situation is and what the policy should be.
And Derek, it seems that Takaichi is being punished in the international media for simply trying to be transparent. This is Japanese legislation, the constitution, and then the security legislation from 2015. She was pushed by the opposition lawmaker to define a scenario. In a sense, does the Japanese public deserve that transparency? Is there an obligation, in a sense, to do that?
It's a democracy. So you're getting asked questions in the diet, something the Chinese don't understand. But you will get hard questions, and you do answer them, and you are open about your interests. And I think the world needs to respect that that's what was happening in Japan. And I think, overall, Japan has to be able to speak freely about its interests, and the world needs to be recognizing that the damage here is mostly done by the Chinese response. And I think a lot of attention, frankly, has been on the wolf warrior response, so-called, by Xue Jian, and maybe less so by others. But that's where the attention needs to be, that is unacceptable response to anything that is said by a foreign leader.
Right, and the root of it is the aggression that China has not renounced. It's not renounced use of force against Taiwan, Randy.
That's right.
You could say that Takaichi, the reports have said that it was the first time that a Japanese PM had actually tried to, define or say what scenario, and so she'd moved away from ambiguity to a form of clarity. But I guess the question is, does that strategic ambiguity, does it benefit China, and not Taiwan and the US when it comes to readiness?
Well, I think, again, Prime Minister Takaichi was making an expression of how she sees Japanese interests. And I think that, although not always explicitly stated in the past, I think that's been true for some time. And former Prime Minister Abe used to say Taiwan security is Japan's security. So there are different formulations of this, but I think this has been true for quite some time, and particularly as China's own power has grown, their military capabilities have grown, the Japanese have been, I think, compelled to say it more explicitly. And look, I would note to our Chinese friends, Prime Minister Takaichi is at about 73% approval right now. So that won't last. Politics follows the laws of gravity, but she's off to a very good start. She's got the support of the Japanese people. I think if they want a stable, constructive relationship with Japan, they better rein in some of these diplomats, such as the one you quoted.
I should say also on the strategic ambiguity, it doesn't prevent Japan or the United States or others from doing what's necessary to prepare for a potential conflict that Japanese have stated, we state through the Taiwan Relations Act, is a threat to our interests, a threat to peace and stability in the Western Pacific, and a threat to our interests. So I would say when you ask what impact it has on us, it doesn't have, I think, a material impact on the seriousness with which our capitals and other capitals, frankly, are taking this scenario and preparing accordingly.
So you don't think sort of behind the scenes it's having an impact where it's just simply too easy to say, because this is what Japanese and Australian officials did say when they were asked by Elbridge Colby what role that they would play. Their response was, well, this is a scenario that's so far away. This is it's not something that we should concentrate on now. Yeah,
there's a difference between that kind of ambiguity or lack of preparedness and the kind of public strategic ambiguity policy, which is more of a public face.
Yeah, sure.
Privately, we should be talking about this seriously because it does affect our respective interests.
Okay. Now, following the announcement of South Korean nuclear submarines built by Seoul with nuclear fuel supplied by Washington, Japanese Defense Minister Koizumi Shinjiro last week stated on national TV, the environment surrounding Japan is so severe that we have to discuss whether to use diesel, as we've done so far, or nuclear power. Japan's ruling coalition, Liberal Democratic Party and Japan Innovation Party, agreed in October in their manifesto to promote submarines powered by a next-generation energy source. Randy, let me ask you, so the South Korean nuclear submarine, obviously that's huge. Should Japan join that club? Australia's already in it under AUKUS. What does that mean for allied naval power in this region?
Well, I think Japan should take a look at it as they are and should have those discussions with the United States and understand what the pathway would be, what are the costs, and what are the infrastructure requirements. You're not just getting a submarine, you're committing to nuclear safety, you're committing to a whole range of steps that one has to take to ensure you can operate these submarines safely. And diesel-electric submarines are fine for coastal defense. In fact, when running on battery, they're very quiet. They're as quiet as a nuclear submarine. But if you want the endurance and you want to stay undetected for longer periods, if you want to be expeditionary, then a nuclear-powered submarine is more appropriate. So to me, that suggests that countries are thinking beyond coastal defense. They're thinking about being a contributor to regional security and stability, and we welcome that.
Is it going too far to say that it could be the Allies moving from sea denial to control?
I think what it says is they have an interest in the entire Indo-Pacific region being free and open and being a partner to the United States. There can be all sorts of ways of thinking about division of labor and complementary deployments, but the capability is a foundation for all of those possibilities. Yeah, so it's something that the U.S. or Trump administration would be very interested in looking at. I think so. I don't serve in the Trump administration, and I'm sure they don't lack for strong opinions on most things, so we'll have to see what they say. Right. Derek, the Japanese ambassador to Australia has been promoting the security triangle between Japan, the US, and Australia, which he says also includes shipbuilding. To what extent do you see Japan really stepping up in its role of collective defense?
I think they're having a debate about this. And 10 years ago, it was very difficult to have that discussion in Tokyo. Now they're very serious about looking at their security, their situation in the region. So there's on the diplomatic side, U.S., Japan, Philippines, Australia, US, Japan, Australia, US, Japan, Korea. There's a lot more conversations on the strategic policy level. On the operational level, I do think Japan wants to be more forward-leaning. Takaichi is of that Abe camp. They are looking to be more proactive in being a security player in the region, and it should be welcomed. You know, the United States is not the same it was in the hyperpower of 20, 30 years ago. We need help of our allies. I do think the Trump administration is looking for that, looking for more assistance. So I think it should be welcomed, and we'll have to see if the political conditions in Tokyo and Japan writ large allow for real kind of operational activity in coming years.
And Randy, on the other side, obviously, China would not be happy with this at all. Can we sort of see the tactics over Takaichi, this latest incident, as part of a bigger strategy for China to suppress this development?
Well, they could take that approach, but I don't think it'll be successful because in many ways they're driving interest in Japan, in Korea, in Australia for having a more activist approach to regional security affairs. It's their own assertiveness that is contributing to that interest. So I don't think it would be successful if the Chinese position was we need to thwart Japan's interest in being more active in the region. I think it would be more constructive if they started talking about things like rule of law, norms on the high seas, how we can operate in proximity to one another safely without incident or accident. But I'm not optimistic that that's the approach they'll take.
Okay. Now, meanwhile, China has advanced its naval power contest with the US with the commissioning of the Fujian, Beijing's third aircraft carrier, but the first to be designed and built in China. The carrier's electromagnetic assisted launch system puts it on par with the US's most advanced Ford-class carrier. However, USS Gerald R. Ford has the advantage of being nuclear powered, while the Fujian is steam and diesel powered. Derek, let me ask you, so for some time analysts have said China doesn't need aircraft carriers to take Taiwan, but you know, what kind of advantage does the Fujian give to China?
Well, there's still questions about their intention to have 3 and maybe 4 aircraft carriers going forward. Aircraft carriers could be used for, I mean, it's used for power projection, it's used to do land operations from carriers, it's mobile, it's agile, it can be used for blockade and to keep folks at bay. A lot of the Chinese strategy is to keep outside forces away.
So that's the US from Guam and Hawaii.
Or Japan. They have other capabilities that allow them to do it. So why do they need these massive platforms, which even those in the United States have thought, do we really need these still?
Because they're vulnerable too, aren't they?
They're vulnerable, and there are anti-carrier missiles. But I think a lot of this is about status, and I think it's about intimidation. I mean, it sends a signal. It's a symbol as much as anything, as much as a capability. Capability is actually hard, and the Chinese are still working the capability. They have to train. They haven't operated ever on off these things. They have to go a long way to make these truly hard for other forces to deal with. But I think it signals a dominance in the region. It signals as a symbol of power.
So you do think it's more symbolic than?
I think it's both.
Right.
I think there's a real symbolic component, a major symbolic component, but I think it obviously has capabilities that are of concern.
So, Randy, I mean, when you scan the media, they're talking about, you know, changing the balance of power because of, you know, maybe the fourth, perhaps a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Do you think it does? Does the US need to be concerned?
Well, we have concerns about the direction of the Chinese military and the PLA Navy for sure. For me, I don't know that the addition of a fourth aircraft carrier is something that tips the balance. I think the problem is we'll never match them in mass. The number of surface platforms and subsurface platforms they can put to sea will always be superior to our numbers. So we have to think in terms of coalitions, how we can leverage our allies with shared interests, how we can have higher quality, if not meet the numbers, that we have a qualitative edge, and that comes through the whole architecture of ISR and communications, command and control, and really the art of conducting modern warfare operations. I mean, aircraft carrier operations are difficult. Night landings and launches are difficult. And I think we would still have an edge qualitatively, but that's the kind of thing the Chinese are working on in addition to acquiring these platforms.
And that must be why they must be so against, for example, the nuclear submarines, being deployed by South Korea and possibly Japan as well as Australia. Do those nuclear submarines complicate that picture of naval power in the region?
I think they do. And as I said, if you're going to do things beyond coastal defense, then a nuclear-powered submarine gives you that capability. I think they also dislike that these are programs that are going to bring the United States and allies closer together. When President Trump went through Asia, he talked about shipbuilding. He talked about this cooperative effort with South Korea. So at the broader strategic level, what the Chinese don't like is that our allies are coming closer to the United States, not being divided and not being separated.
Okay, let's go to the final question. War-torn Myanmar is sitting on significant reserves of heavy rare earths, in particular dysprosium and terbium, used in permanent magnets for defense equipment like guidance systems in Javelin and Tomahawk missiles, fins on F-35 fighter jets, and sonar systems in Virginia-class submarines. China is the main and only market for Myanmar's heavy rare earths at the moment, and they are trucked across their border. Derek, obviously you were the ambassador to Myanmar. How important would Myanmar's rare earths be to the US?
We're in the hunt for rare earths wherever we can find them because of the reliance on China and particularly on the ability to develop those rare earths. I think, though, Myanmar is a difficult one because of the terrain, because of the geography. China has all of that advantage. They have the relationship advantage. They have the geographical advantage, having the border right there. They have the production and some processing capacity as well. So I believe that the Trump administration had looked at this. I don't know where they've come out on it. But if I were advising them, I'd say this is probably not the place to focus because, in fact, rare earths are not that rare. They're mostly a problem because of environmental hazards and such and pollution. But we might want to look elsewhere where it's easier for us to get the stuff actually out and processed and then to America and its allied production.
How about it being, though, a strategic vulnerability for China because China relies so much on Myanmar for the heavy rare earths?
Well, I believe not just on the rare earths question. I think generally the United States should do much more. We're really not present at all in Myanmar anymore. When I was there was a lot of attention in the Obama administration, but both the Biden administration and the Trump administration has not given it the attention it needs. China has its way in that country now. That's not good for Myanmar to basically leave a vacuum in which the Chinese can fill. It affects Myanmar's sovereignty, it affects ASEAN, and I would say it affects all of us.
So why the neglect?
It's hard. It's just very hard and complicated situation. It's hard to figure out how you get your arm around such a complicated environment where it's not just sort of a junta and an opposition, but a very fragmented opposition of various civil wars going on at once, many of whom are fighting in areas where the rare earths exist. So to get access to those rare earths or to get access in Myanmar to deal with that complex situation takes a lot of resources. And time is the ultimate resource in Washington. So how much time are people going to put to that versus Taiwan and some other really imminent issues that we need to face? And
Randy, Donald Trump has a kind of one-year reprieve, if we can call it that. That's what he's managed to negotiate after meeting Xi Jinping in terms of that restrictions on China's rare earths to the US. There's been talk of 2 years as being the time when possibly the US could break that dependency. Do you think that that's possible?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't bank the 1 year for sure. A political problem arises, some difference, China could walk away from that. They've generally not been good at honoring the agreements they make with the United States and others, frankly. But I think the point is we don't need this reliance on China, and we need to work hard at it, whether that's 1 year, 2 years. This is the direction we need to go. Japan very successfully weathered a rare earth ban, I believe twice, 2010 and 2015. We've not quite faced that. We've faced temporary pauses. But I think the work that's underway in Fort Worth, in Australia, and Malaysia, I think these are projects that are heading in the right direction. I don't know if we can completely eliminate our reliance on China, but we can reduce it pretty significantly in that 2-year horizon.
Right. That's great to know. Derek, in terms of, the dependency, or the level of dependency on China, what kind of leverage does that give China? Because we just said that many of the defense systems require these heavy rare earths. And what does it mean for any war over Taiwan?
Well, it's proved pretty good leverage because of the way the Trump administration has handled. When they shut it down, our companies were at risk. There's a lot of concern about where we're going to get these urgent strategic resources. So we have to urgently move to alternatives. For Taiwan, I think we're okay. I mean, I think we have the capabilities, and we need to work on the alliances and work on the joint operational planning that's required for an increasing Chinese threat. But rare earths, there's a challenge for us commercially, militarily, in all respects, and it's getting the priority attention it deserves. Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much to my guests, Derek Mitchell, Randy Shriver, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.